begin by wishing all of you a good morning or good afternoon or good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. There are people who are watching live now on Zoom, as well as people who are watching on YouTube at the moment. And there are probably also people who watch later. In fact, I know there are people who have told me that they will watch later. So we have people watching at different times of the day. And I'd like to welcome all of you now. So to begin with, the first thing I would like to ask is that actually, if you could watch with your video camera on, that would be really helpful. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that for myself, when I'm teaching, it's always nice to actually see people as I'm teaching, and now it's much nicer now that I see people showing up. It's always nice to have faces to look at, because otherwise I'm just staring at a webcam. And when you're staring at easy to what do we say? It's not so easy to reactions and so forth. No. I just feel like you're speaking to people. So I want to feel like I'm speaking to people. So actually, I've got to get this so I see big pictures of people. So that's the first thing. And the second reason is actually when you are listening and you have your webcam turned off, then it's quite possible that you're going to think, God, it doesn't matter what I do. You're going to start wandering around the room and doing this and that and all sorts of other things. You might be there have been plenty of stories of legislators in parliaments who've been caught on Zoom wearing no clothes and so forth. And you might think that if your webcam is turned off, then you can sit around and listen without any clothes on. But what happens when you do that is that you actually, what's important for listening is that you have a good attitude, that you have the right motivation, the right way of listening. So if you listen with your camera turned on, then it kind of means you're being mindful of your behavior and more mindful of your thoughts. When you're more mindful of your behavior, then your way of thinking will naturally follow with that. So I'd like to request all of you who are watching to please turn your cameras on. So we will begin this morning with the prayers of refuge and bodhichitta. So let me show these to you on the screen. Take a moment. I have to remember what I need to do. Okay, so please recite these prayers of refuge and bodhichitta with faith and devotion. O Sanje Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chabsum Je Daki Jin Sogi Be Sunam Je Dola Penjer Sanje Barsho Sanje Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Barane Chabsum Je Daki Jin Sogi Be Sunam Je Dola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chabsum Je Dagi Jin Sogi Be Sunam Je Jola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Senjen Tamje Dewa Tam Dewe Judan Dembrar Jur Juraji, Donga Dan Donga Ji Judan Rawa Juraji, Donga Mebe Dewa Tamba Tan Min Rawa Juraji, Nyerin Shadani Tan Rawe, Tanyon Chembola Nebra Juraji. So now please think to yourselves that listening with a good and the bigger of the vaster our motivation is, we're going to get out of the teaching. So the best motivation to have is the motivation of thinking to yourself that you are listening to these teachings in order to bring yourself and all other sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood. So this is the motivation of bodhicitta. That is the best motivation. Another good motivation is, of course, the motivation of wanting to achieve. Excuse me.
David, your bandwidth is low.
Okay, I'd forgotten to change my internet connection to the one that's more stable in this shriner. So I hope that this will be more stable now. The second best motivation is to listen to these teachings with the wish of achieving liberation from samsara, recognizing that samsara is just a pit of suffering, moments of seeming pleasure, but that pleasure doesn't last. And in its nature, it is, as we talk about in the Dharma, and by nature it is suffering. And so we need to achieve liberation from that. And then even that is kind of a hard motivation to actually develop honestly. So even just a motivation to wish to improve yourself, to become a better person, to understand yourself and what you're doing better is also a good and important motivation. But it's also good to try to stretch ourselves. So we may be, if we're honest with ourselves, we might say, well, I'm actually really still attached to this lifetime, but I'd like to have a better motivation. So I'm going to pretend to have the motivation of bodhicitta. May I develop the motivation of bodhicitta? And then if you listen with that attitude, that is also good. So in this way, please listen this morning or this afternoon. I don't know what time of day I should say. Please listen with this motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are discussing is the Abhidharma, the treasury of Abhidharma as explained by the treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu as explained by the ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. And so this is the third year of a class, and I think some of you may already have the book for this, but not everyone has the book. So let me see what I can do. You need to know, wait a minute. I have to figure out how to do multiple things at once. When you're teaching in person, you don't have to worry so much about it. When you're teaching on a Zoom and you have to manipulate the computer and talk, it's a different matter. So here we are. This is an image of the cover of the book, The Jewels from the Treasury, and this is published by KDD Publications. So I've given two addresses below, so you can download a free ebook version, or if you'd prefer to look at hard copy, you can order hard copy from the Namse Bangso bookstore. Namse Bangso is the bookstore at KTD Monastery. Then they're the publishers, and they also have a bookstore, so you can order it from there. If you have your favorite bookstore down the street or wherever, you can order it from your favorite bookstore as well. So if you can do whichever you prefer. So that is that is the book that we're going by. And now I think there are many of you who are watching online. So what I would like to do is I'd also like to send a chat with the with the address for the free ebook edition. So all of you who are watching on Zoom should have received that chat. So that is that is kind of the first thing, what we're talking about and what we're talking. Now, the second thing is which part of this, it's a large book. I mean, I've got several of you have the book. It's a big, thick book. Well, this is actually the third year of a course. And so in the third year of the course, we've actually in the first 2 years, we've already been through the first 2/3 of the text. Now, that's in terms of the commentary text. Actually, if you look at it in terms of the chapters, we are halfway through the chapters. There are 8 chapters, and we have gone through 4 of the 8 chapters, 2 in the first year in Namo Buddha, and that was not recorded on video. We do have audio, but it's not on video. Then there were 2 chapters that we did last year over, that we did on YouTube, not on Zoom, but on YouTube. And then so in this year, we're doing the last 4 chapters, and you might be wondering, why is it that we could do only 2 chapters for each of the first 2 years, and this year we're going to rush through 4? How is that? Well, if you understand a little bit about how the book goes, about how the whole text is, that makes it more understandable as to why we're going to be able to go through the last 4 chapters. And so basically, when we take a look at the Abhidharma, the Treasury of Abhidharma, there are 8 chapters. The first 2 of these 2 chapters teach a general presentation of how phenomena work. So it tells, what are the 5 aggregates? What are the 12 sense bases? What are the 18 elements? These are different ways of classifying different phenomena to know, well, when you classify phenomena in different ways, then you can learn something about how they are, how they work. And then that's the first chapter. And the second chapter talks about the faculties, primarily about the sensory faculties, but also other faculties that allow us to know objects and do things. It also talks about causes and conditions and other aspects of composite phenomena. So those 2 chapters together give us a basic idea of how everything works on a general level. And so then in the remaining chapters, Vasubandhu starts in the 3rd chapter by teaching the teachings of the world. This is the world of sentient beings, which means all the beings inside the world, all of us and anyone in any world realm. And then there is the external world that contains them. So traditionally, this is the teachings on the Mount Meru and the 4 continents and so forth. So there are these different worlds. And so that all together, actually, if you think about it, the nature of the world is suffering. It's just the nature of our existence is suffering. So if you think about it, this chapter is teaching the truth of suffering. Well, then you wonder, how is it that suffering comes about? Well, the suffering comes about because of karma. So the next chapter teaches karma. In fact, the first line of the next chapter says, from karma, various worlds are born. So all of the different worlds that there are, and all the beings in the worlds, are born out of karma. So then it gives an extensive teaching on karma. Now that is what we covered last year, those 2 chapters, the world and karma. And so then the question is, well, what does karma come out of? Well, karma comes out of the afflictions, right? So we have the afflictions, and so that's the next chapter. That's the topic of the first chapter that we will be speaking about this year, teachings on the kernels. And I'll be explaining that term, the kernels, in a few minutes. So taken together, these 2 chapters actually teach the truth of the origin, because the truth of the origin of suffering has 2 parts. It has karma and afflictions. So that's the truth of origin. Now, at the very end of this 5th chapter, it has a teaching on what we call the perfect knowings. And what the perfect knowings are, they are the wisdom or the knowing that arises once you have abandoned the afflictions. In other words, this is the truth of cessation. So this 5th chapter teaches, as well as the afflictions, part of the half of the truth of origin, it also teaches the truth of cessation. Then in the sixth chapter, sixth chapter is about the teachings on the path and individuals. So the teachings on the path is obviously the teachings on, well, the truth of the path, right? And then we also have the individuals who are on that path. And then in the final two chapters, the teachings on the absorptions, and the teachings on wisdom and the teachings on absorptions, we have the teachings about the qualities you gain from meditating on the path. Because when you have teachings on the qualities that you gain, then that makes you kind of enthusiastic to follow the path. You think, oh, I could do this too. I could achieve these qualities myself. And so that's why that teaches, those two are taught. However, when we're talking about the final three chapters, the teachings on the path and the teachings on wisdom and the teachings on the absorptions, these are primarily for the practice of the foundation vehicle. That is the Hinayana in Sanskrit, the foundation vehicle. And because of this, they are teaching types of meditation and knowledge that comes out of meditation that we don't practice much in the Tibetan tradition. So for that reason, the Tibetan tradition of teaching this text is to go through those chapters fairly quickly and not to give them a whole lot of explanation. And so that is part of the reason why we will be able to finish the entire book this summer, even going through at a fairly, hopefully leisurely pace. So that is in addition to explaining why we're kind of dividing the book this way and going through half of the chapters this year, this is also giving kind of an overview of the whole book, the whole text. So in terms of the whole text, where are we? We are at the point where we are discussing the truth of the origin, which is the afflictions. And here in this chapter, the chapter 5, which we're starting on today, there are, what do we say? There are many different names for the afflictions. Sometimes we call them the kernels. Sometimes they're called the entanglers. Sometimes they're called floods. They're called the fetters, the bonds. And so there are many different ways that they're talked about. So they're just different names applied to the same sort of category of mental events, which gives us different ways of understanding those mental events. And the reason why we need to understand them is because they're the root of existence. The root of existence is the kernels, as we will discuss in just a moment. So that is kind of like the whole, what do we say, the overview of where we are at this point. So now, having gone through this overview, we will start taking a look at the text. And 1 second. Okay, where are we? That's what I want. So the text in chapter 5 starts like this. So here it is. This is the beginning of Wangchuk Dorje's commentary. So we have the root text by Vasubandhu, and then we have the commentary by the 9th Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje. So Wangchuk Dorje wrote shorter commentaries wrote a shorter commentary on the Treasury of Abhidharma. It's much shorter than the 8th Karmapa Mikya Dorje's commentary and shorter than many other commentaries. It's a good one for beginners. And so when we look at this, we're primarily going to be looking at Wangchuk Dorje's commentary, but also there are the words from the root text embedded within it. So we're starting at the 5th area, the teachings on the kernels. So the kernels means here the afflicted kernels, basically like the seeds of the afflictions in our beings. As long as you have the seeds of afflictions in your beings, then you can have the full-blown afflictions like basically your negative emotions that would then motivate you to act. So here in teaching them, Wangchuk Dorje begins with a verse of Homage, which reads, "Your wisdom itself from its origin truly awake makes gifts that illumine all wanderers with help and with happiness. By tearing away all the darkness of the fleeting stains, you great precious Kajupas grant us your blessings." So this verse here is giving us just kind of like, he's paying homage to his teachers. The reason for paying homage to your teachers is that that's where you get the teachings. Wangchuk Dorje wouldn't have had no ability to gain the teachings on Abhidharma or any of the other teachings were it not for his teachers, in particular Vijayakirti Namgyal Japa, and it was one of his main teachers of the Abhidharma, as well as the fifth Shamar Kunchu Yenak. And so but he's also paying attention to all of the precious Kagyu posts because he received these teachings from the Kagyu tradition. So that's his homage. The homage is saying that by taking these teachings, it casts light because it helps us understand it. So it's like the light of knowing that tears away the darkness of unknowing or the fleeting stains. And then the next stanza teaches the reason for explaining this chapter. It reads, "The thicket of suffering and origin's faults not ripped out, we have not arrived in complete freedom's happiest place. So in order to cut out its radix, the kernels, I'll open the door to the treasury that teaches the kernels." So it's like you have all the suffering and origin. It's like this deep thicket that you have, massive tangled branches and roots and thorns and so forth that you can't get through and you can't get out of when you're in it. If you want the freedom, you need to rip all of this out. So we can't get through it. We can't get through the thicket to the place of complete freedom and happiness. So we need to remove this. And if we pulled out the thicket, if you just cut the branches, then the bramble's going to grow back. All the thicket's going to grow back. So you have to actually pull it out by its root. And so what is the root or radix? The root is the kernels, the afflicted kernels. So for that reason, he's teaching or opening the door to the treasure that teaches the kernels. And so this teaching has, as it says here, the fifth area, the teaching on the kernels, as an explanation of the text and a presentation of the area's name. Now, this is kind of like a Tibetan, really, very literal outline here. The presentation of the area's name is like 3 lines at the end. The rest of the text is all that, but it's kind of presented as similar level of hierarchy. So the main explanation, the text of the area has 3 topics. So the nature of the kernels, what discards the kernels, and the results of discarding the kernels. These are the main things. So when we're thinking about the afflictions, we have to understand 3 things about the afflictions. We need to know, what are they? What are they? How do they work? What are they? Then we need to know, well, how do we get rid of them? What do we need to discard the kernels? And then the third part is the result of discarding the kernels. So what good does it do us to eliminate the afflictions? So those are the 3 main parts of this chapter. So here we begin the chapter. The chapter begins with, again, dividing more outline here. So the first section, the nature of the kernels, has 2 topics. The first is teaching the kernels as the root of existence and understanding the kernels. So at this point, I want to take a moment and just speak a little bit about the meaning of this word, the kernels. Kernels, and this is actually, the Sanskrit word is anushaya, and the Tibetan word is chagye. So the Sanskrit word anushaya has like at least 4 different explanations of its etymology that we will get to later. When the Tibetans translated, they picked one, which is saying that there's something small, anushaya, that expands, gets bigger. So they translated it as ta-ye, which means little, big. And so some people translate this, then take that term and translate it literally as subtle expander. The problem with a term like subtle expander in English is there are 2 problems. The first is that it's a mouthful. It's a hard word to say. So I prefer simpler terms. So I thought I'd call it kernels rather than use the subtle expander, the little term, or the literal term. And the other reason is that actually this term, anushaya, is one that is used in other Buddhist traditions as well. It's used in the Pali tradition. If you take a look at the Theravada Abhidharma, they also talk about the anushaya. But but they don't translate it as subtle expanders. And in fact, if you look at the compendium of Abhidharma, which is translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, that text does not talk about, does not give the same explanation of the meaning of the word. So in other words, when if you're translating the word literally, you have to be really careful. So in order to, I wanted to come up with a term that would work better for both terms. So what we're talking about are basically like the seeds of the afflictions that are within us. And we'll get into that more later on later on today. So we're talking basically about the seeds of the afflictions that are in your beings that in certain circumstances can expand or develop into full-blown afflictions that will then motivate you to act and accumulate bad karma that will what do we say? Karma that would then perpetuate your existence. So that is why the karma, the afflictions, are so important. So, or these kernels are so important, because as long as you have these kernels of the afflictions in your being, the afflictions can develop. So in order to free yourself of the afflictions, you have to know what these kernels are and eliminate the kernels. So that's the basic point of this. So here, it says, so the first thing is, the first chapter is teaching the kernels as the root of existence. So here we have the text from the root, and it reads in verse 1a, the first line of the first stanza, the root of existence is the kernels. So with the kernels, the root of existence is the kernels, it says. So existence, this word has many different meanings. So existence here, we're actually referring to karma. Now, the way that this happens is it's because of the different meanings of the word existence. What we're referring to here specifically, and I'm considering changing it in this translation as I go through, one of the other reasons for teaching this class now is that I get a chance to take a look at my translation, which is an early one it's my first long book. And so it's a good chance for me to look at it and think, oh, I better change this, I better change that. So this is one word that's under consideration that I might need to change. The root of existence is the kernel. Existence here, the word existence, it's one word in Sanskrit, bhava, and in Tibetan it's generally translated as sipa. But it can also, but it has different meanings depending on how you use it. And here, actually, according to the commentary by Yashomitra, it refers to the link of interdependence of becoming, right? And what becoming is, that means the karmic actions that then produce existence. So here that's saying the root of existence, the root of becoming, is the kernels. If you think about it in terms of the 12 links of interdependence, you have ignorance, formation, consciousness, 6 sense bases, what is it? 6 sense bases, feeling, contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, birth, aging, and death. And I think I've left one of them out there. At any rate, the important one is that before you have becoming, you have craving and grasping. And what are craving and grasping? They are afflictions. So if you have afflictions, then you are going to have karmic actions. If you have afflictions such as anger or pride, then those will generally, or anger or desire, will primarily motivate you to do negative actions that will result in birth in the lower realms. If you have neutral afflictions such as view, that will promote you to do defiled virtuous actions that would result in rebirth in the higher realms. In either way, it's resulting in rebirth. And that all comes out of the kernels or the afflictions. The root of existence is the kernels. So to read Wangchuk Dorje's commentary on this, from karma, various worlds are born is explained. So that is the first line of the 4th chapter. So the third chapter teaches about worlds. Those come from the from the karma. So the fourth chapter teaches karma, and then karma. What does it come from? It comes from the afflictions. So that is what is taught. So that karma is actually accumulated by power of the afflicted kernels. Without the kernels, existence would not be manifestly established. So for that reason, know that the root of existence is the kernels. So here, if we think about this, is what I just said about existence versus becoming. Existence would not be manifestly established. So with the link of becoming and the 12 links of interdependence, becoming is the karmic actions that establish existence. So without those karmic actions, then you do not establish your existence in either the desire, form, or formless realms, in any of the three realms. So you have to have the afflictions to do that. So here, this is the reason why it's a difficult word to translate, why sipa here, or bhava, is a difficult one to translate, because it's actually being used in both senses. It both means the karmic actions and the existences in samsara that result from those karmic actions. So that's the main point here. I think that in this group of people who are listening, and some live and some people over YouTube at later times, there are probably several people who are, I know there are several people who are, what do we say, studying or learning translation, maybe some people who are already doing a fair amount of translation. And so I'll probably be speaking a little bit about some of these words and the meanings of the different words as we go through. At any rate, that is the main point. This is an important point. This is why this chapter is actually considered by many Tibetan scholars the most important chapter in the Treasury of Abhidharma, because we're talking about the root of existence. It's like when you are, when you look at other texts, like in the Way of the Bodhisattva, there's a lot of battle imagery about, fighting a battle against the afflictions, right? So when you're fighting a battle, you have to know who the enemy is. If you don't know who your enemy is, well, who are you going to kill? You're going to end up killing innocent civilians and not do any good for anyone. In the same way here, you have to know what are we trying to eliminate. Because if you don't know what we're trying to eliminate, then you could do all sorts of different things that in the end will not actually do you any good. So we need to understand what the nature of the problem is, and that is understanding the kernels. So to resume looking at the text, and of course you could also look at this in the book. Some of you may be happier looking at it in the book. And the book is on what page? The book, it starts on page 389. And so we're on page 390 if you're looking at your books. But in terms of understanding the kernels, there are three different aspects of understanding them. So we know the first part is knowing that they're the root of existence, and the second is understanding the kernels. So understanding the kernels, there are three topics. The classifications of the kernels is the first, then how the kernels arise, and third is the enumeration of the kernels. This is just like knowing how all the different types of things that you can know about or that you are important to understand. Classifications are kind of like, if you just think of it all as like one big thing, sometimes it's hard to deal with. And so you kind of break it up and say, okay, actually with the afflictions, what do we have? Well, we have desire and anger and ignorance, and right? So knowing all the different parts. Then classification of how then talking about how they arise, it's important to understand which leads to what. And then the enumeration tells you the different numbers and of the kernels. And there's actually a fair amount, or the different synonyms and different ways of explaining them as well. So the classifications of the kernels has three parts: the classifications of the essence, the classifications of the aspects, and the classification of what has the kernels. What are they associated with? So the first one is the classification of the essence, and this begins with two parts. There's the general classification and specifically classifying the views and parts. So the general classification has four topics: classifying as 6, classifying as 7, classifying as 10, and classifying as 98. So how do you want to do it? In other words, something that's important to say here is when we take a look at the classification as 6 is not to think that you've got 6 discrete whole things. you've got 6 sort of categories, right? And then those categories can be divided into other ways. So starting with the first of these, classifying as 6. There are 6: desire and likewise anger, pride, ignorance, and view and doubt. So to classify the kernels concisely, there are 6 kernels. So what are these 6 kernels? So they are desire, that's number 1, anger, pride, ignorance, view, and doubt. So that's 6, right? We've got 6. Um, I'm sharing the screen and counting on my fingers. I don't know if you can see both at the same time. At any rate, you've got both. You've got the 6 that you can, you've got the 6 different kernels here. So they're ascertained to be 6 in terms of their focus. So in terms of their focus, that means in terms of what are you looking at? When you're looking at desire, you are looking, the focus of desire is a pleasant object that you want more of. When you're looking at anger, you're looking at an unpleasant object that you, unpleasant object that you want to get rid of. When you have pride, you are focusing on yourself and you're just full of yourself, and ignorance and view and doubt. So these all have different things that they're focusing on. So that's why it said ascertained to be 6 in terms of their focus. So the word likewise is an important word here. As Wangchuk Dorje says, the word likewise means that anger and the others can likewise develop in relation to anything that desire focuses on. So this is an important word, actually. So we've got this word likewise. I'll highlight it for you. Word likewise. So there are 6: desire and likewise anger. The important thing about this is essentially saying, to put it in a more colloquial way, you're only going to get angry about something if you're attached to it. Only if you have attachment are you going to get angry. If you don't care about something, you're not going to get angry about it, right? So if you are attached to, I don't know, I'll have to think of a stupid example here. If you are attached to money and someone steals your money and you get angry at that person for stealing your money, you are actually only angry at that person because you are attached to your money. If you are not attached, you're not going to get angry. No attachment, no anger. So in other words, you can get angry about things. The anger comes about because you still have attachment to things. If you're not attached, you're not going to be angry. But it also means, as Wangchuk Dorje says, that the desire can, that the anger will also develop in relation to things that you desire. So you can desire something, and because you have attachment to it, then you can also be angry at that same thing. We can see this with people easily. You are attached to a person. Something happens, and then you get angry at that person. So it's that attachment. What you are attached to is what you will be able to get angry about. Or likewise, you're with pride, you're attached to yourself, and that's why you can get full of yourself and pride, proudful, and so forth, and ignorance and doubt as well. So that is this point here. So that's one way of looking at this. We're looking at this in terms of dividing it into 6. But we can also divide this into 7 points. And so this is the next point, classifying as 7. If you're looking at the book, this is on page 390. Some of you may be trying to peer at your computer screen, so looking at the book is easier. So classifying as 7 has 2 points. These 2 points are, first of all, the actual classification, and then the second is identifying the desire for existence. So these 6 are taught as 7 when desire is split. So if you take the 6 and you split desire into 2. So what are our 6? We've got desire, anger, pride, ignorance, doubt, a view, and doubt. So that's 6. Now you take desire, the first one, and you split it into 2. That makes 7, right? And the 2 types of 7 are, or the 2 types of desire, desire for desire and the desire for existence. So As it says, as Wangchuk Dorje says in his commentary, the 6 kernels are taught as 7 kernels when desire is split into the desire for the desire realm, that is. So when you have, when I capitalize the D for desire, that means desire realm. That's kind of a shorthand here. Otherwise, it gets very heavy to always say desire realm. So capital D, desire, is the desire realm, and the desire for existence. So the desire for the desire realm means the desire for all of the things that are in the desire realm. In particular, that would mean food and sex. Those are the main things that we have desire for in the desire realm. But of course, other things, pride and, fame, popularity, money, and all that. That's all desire for desire. And then there's also desire for existence. The desire for existence is the desire for the form and formless realm. This is attachment to the pleasures of the dhyana and formless meditations. So in this way, there are 7 because there's desire for desire, anger, desire for existence, pride, ignorance, view, and doubt. That's 7, right? So here, there's actually a long discussion in the auto commentary by Vasubandhu on the Treasury of Abhidharma. It says, here the meaning of what are called the kernels is proposed by the Great Exposition School to be manifest afflictions, by the Vatsiputriyas to be attainment, and by the Sutra School to be seeds. So we have 3 different positions. The first is saying that the kernels are actual afflictions. They're actual functioning, manifest afflictions. That's the first position. The second position is the Vatsiputriya position. The Vatsiputriya is one of the 18 original schools of Buddhism. They say that it's not an actual affliction. Instead, it's the attainment of an affliction. And then the third is the Sutra school that says they're kind of like the seeds of the afflictions. We've got 3 different positions here. So we need to think about, well, what does this mean? So in the Great Exposition School, they're saying that the afflictions are the manifest afflictions. It's like an actual affliction. So when you have the kernel of anger, for example, it is actual anger. It's just a really tiny little bit of anger that you hardly notice. That's the first position. Or like with desire, it'd be like this really subtle desire that you just don't really notice, but it's there all the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the kernels. So that's the Great Exposition position. Now, the Vatsiputriya position is that it is attainment. So we spoke about this in the first year. It's talked about in the, which chapter is it? It's in the first or second chapter? It's in the second chapter when it's talking about non-concurrent formations. According to the Abhidharma tradition of the Great Exposition School and of other schools as well, there's, when you have something, in addition to having that thing, you also have what's called the attainment. It's like a phenomena, a dharma that is like that, the quality of having that. So, for example, all of us ordinary individuals, we have the afflictions of desire, anger, and so forth. We also have the attainment or the possession that of those things. And that possession is a real, they say, a real phenomena, a non-concurrent formation that is separate from the thing itself. Or if you are if you have achieved the level of stream enterer, then you have a degree of knowing or wisdom, and then you'd also have in addition to that, you'd also have the attainment of that level. So those are that is what they mean by attainments. So the attainment is not the thing itself. You can have the attainment of something. So what they're saying is that when you have the attainment of anger, then it's there. The anger may be there or not, but since you still have it, that attainment can still be there, right? So that's how they're explaining it. So it's not an actual affliction. What would be the problem what's the problem with the Great Exposition position where you say that they're actual afflictions? You might think, well, that's fine. They're just really subtle. You don't really notice them. There's nothing wrong with that, you'd think, right? Well, the problem is that it is very clear in the sutras and in the texts that when you have a virtuous focus, when you're looking at something with a virtuous state of mind, then there is no anger. There are none of the afflictions are present at the same time. So that would contradict that position. But we can also see, like when you're feeling really strong faith, or you're feeling strong love, what do you feel in your mind? Especially when you're feeling love. If you're feeling really strong love, just like are you going to feel any anger at the same time? You can't. It's just like too strong. There's no anger at that point. So that's the problem with the great exposition position. So the Vatsaputriyas say that it's attainment. And because they say it's attainment, it's like even then for an ordinary individual, even when you're feeling really strong love, you still have the attainment of anger. And because you still have the attainment, then that anger can once again re-arise. That's their position. But the Sutra school then looked at that position and they said, well, this doesn't quite work either. For one thing, there are scriptural proofs. There are sutras where the Buddha taught about the kernels as being concurrent with mind. That means that they're associated with mind. Like you have mind and mental factors, and the kernels and afflictions are all mental factors that are associated with, or you can say concurrent with a particular, with a consciousness. And so the kernels are said to be associated with consciousnesses in some sutras. So that Vatsaputriya position doesn't quite work. So what the sutra school says is that the kernels are actually like seeds. They're like dormant. It's like they're dormant afflictions. They're not really active. They're there, but they're not active. And they're kind of, the reason that they're there is that they're produced by the previous afflictions, by the power of kind of the basis, your body and physical and psychological makeup that produces afflictions. So that is there, but they aren't actually manifest afflictions. They're dormant afflictions, okay? Then when the conditions happen, they develop and they become manifest afflictions. So you've got these seeds or dormant seeds that then become full things. The analogy for them being dormant is like when you have a memory. When you have a memory, there's something that happened, an experience that you happen that kind of gets somehow imprinted in your mind, and it's dormant. You don't think about it. And then all of a sudden, the conditions come together for you to remember that memory, and then it comes back. It's like that memory is dormant in your mind stream until the conditions come back. So they say it's similar with the kernels of the afflictions. So they are afflictions, but dormant. So that's the position of the Sutra school. So we've got these three different positions of what they are. Either manifest afflictions, as the Great Exposition says, or the attainments of the afflictions, as the Vatsaputriyas say, or they are seeds, the seeds of the afflictions. And so of these three positions, actually here, Wangchuk Dorje does not say this in his commentary. Vasubandhu says in the auto commentary that he thinks that the position of the Sutra school is the most reasonable position. So those are that is that. So that is kind of, and this is also another reason for using the word kernels as a translation, because when I'm picking the word as the translation for the Sanskrit Anushaya or Tibetan Tagye, there are different schools that give it different meanings. And is it possible to get a word that actually covers all those meanings? That's something that you kind of have to think about when you're translating. It's not always possible. Here, it seemed to me that the English word kernel can be used in the sense of being like a seed or a dormant seed, as in the Sutra school. It also can mean something that's manifest. For example, we have the phrase of like a kernel of truth. When someone says something, like a politician says something that's kind of just a little bit true, there's a kernel of truth there. Not even if it's not the whole thing, right? So you've got the kernel of truth. So there's some, so it can possibly be manifest at the same time. So you've got the, so that's one of the reasons why I chose the word kernel. Obviously, we haven't really, what do we say? Settled, standard terminology in English. And so that's a difficulty that we have to face, both as translators and as students. So now we will continue along. And so now we identifying the desire for existence. We talked about these two types of existence. So, well, what is this desire for existence? And here on my ebook format, it's kind of splitting the verse into two. So identifying a desire for existence, that which arises in two realms is desire for existence, since it looks inward. It is taught to rebut the idea it is freedom. So here, the screen, I wonder if I resize the screen. This is one of the good things about, am I going to get more here? Ah, there we see the whole verse together. And I hope it's still visible on your screen. Okay, so that which arises in two realms is the desire for existence, since it looks inward. It is taught to rebut the idea it is freedom. So you've got the desire for the desire realm and the desire for existence, or for the two upper realms. So the reason for splitting these two, as it says in the commentary on the next page, or on page 391 of the book, that desire which arises in the two form and formless realms is explained to be a desire for existence. So if we go back and look here, we've got that which arises. So that desire which arises in the two realms of form and formless is desire for existence. So when you have the desire of the desire realm, that's desire for desire. Desire of the form and formless realms is grouped together as desire for existence. Now, the reason for this is that it's different in that it looks inward, because they, the two desires of form and formless, are attachment to absorption, but that means the deep meditative absorption, and to its support. So they're similar in looking inward. So they focus inward, as opposed to looking outward at things as we do in the desire realm. In the form and formless realm, the meditation is focused entirely inward. And in fact, in so the higher levels, the sensory faculties don't function at all when you're in meditation. Or there aren't even any sensory faculties, especially in the form realm. So they look inward, so it's looking at this. And the reason why this is taught, it is taught that these are desire for existence, is to rebut the wrong idea, existence in those two realms, is freedom. This is an important point. And actually we see this, and this is actually a big difference between, in particular, Hindu philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. Because in Hindu philosophy, I was actually having an exchange with a student a few weeks ago where he was speaking about this. And in the Hindu tradition, when you achieve the deep meditative state where the mind no longer wanders outward, that is considered, in some Hindu traditions, that is considered to be liberation. So in other words, this is when Hindu traditions say that when you achieve the dhyanas or you achieve the formless realms, that this is liberation. We think about it with the Buddha when he went to his first two teachers. They taught him the dhyana meditations and the formless meditations, and they said, "This is liberation." And the Buddha said, "No, this isn't. This is still impermanent." And so this is showing why is this liberation still not why are these meditations not liberation? It's because they still have that desire for existence. So it's saying it's in order to rebut the idea that that all you have to do to achieve liberation is to achieve those meditations. So that is the classification in 7. 7 means, so you take the basic 6 of desire, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, and views, and you divide a desire into 2. So that gives you, what do we say? That gives you 7. So now you can also then take these 7 and you can divide them. You can, instead of dividing desire, you leave desire all as one, but then you can divide the view instead. And so that is what we have next. In the next section, it says, classifying as 10. So in the Abhidharma, excuse me, 5 views are personality, wrong view, and holding the extremes, overesteeming view, and discipline, austerity. Thus, there are 10. So you've got your 5 that are not views. You've got desire, anger, ignorance, pride, and doubt. Those are not views. That's 5. Then in addition, we have views, right? So then as Wang Chudorde says, in the Abhidharma, the kernels are also classified as 10 by dividing view into 5 views. So this is like saying basically views means your ideas about the world, your philosophies, your ideas. It's like intelligence or prajna that it isn't completely cooked. It's not completely, it's not completely well formed. So it's type of defective or bad prajna, but it's but there are different ways that it can manifest. And so here in the Abhidharma, we're classifying it in terms of 5 different views. I suppose if you wanted to look at it, otherwise, there are other. What do we say? There are also the view classification 60 or 360 or 80,000 different views as well. But here we're talking about it in 5 categories. So these 5 views are the view of personality, wrong view, the view of holding the extremes, the view of an overesteeming view, and the view of overesteeming discipline and austerity. Thus, there are the 5 views and 5 non-views for a total of 10 kernels. So these 5, so you've got, what do we got? We've got the 5 the 5 non-views: the desire, ignorance, desire, anger, ignorance, pride, and doubt. Those 5. Then we've got the views. We've got personality, wrong view, holding extremes or extreme view, overesteeming view, and overesteeming discipline and austerity. So 5 and 5 is 10, right? Now these 5, we will get into the actual details of what they are tomorrow. Basically, personality view is looking at your 5 aggregates and saying me or mine, essentially. It's like a view of a self. And some people actually translate this term as view of a self. We'll discuss the term and we'll discuss discuss what it is more tomorrow. So basically, personality view is looking at the aggregates and saying me or mine. Wrong view is in particular denying. I mean, it can also be projections, but it's in particular denying things like karmic cause and effect, or denying that there are any results from the path and so forth. The view of holding the extreme views are 2. There's eternalist and there's nihilist. Now, the English word nihilist is not quite the same as the Tibetan word chepa or the Sanskrit cheda, but it's what it means is that you've got the eternalist view that means like, I've got a soul and it's going to last forever. And the nihilist view is you die and it's done. It's over at that point. So the word nihilist in English says that nothing makes any difference. And that's kind of like an implication or a potential implication of saying that everything ends at the moment of death and there's no continuation. That's holding the extremes. And the view of overesteeming view means when you are looking at when you were looking at all of your various views and say, this is great. So you have the view of there being some sort of an Atman or some sort of a soul and saying, this is the best view. Or your view of things of the materialist view and you say, this is the best view. And you cling to that as being the best view. You are overesteeming that view. And that's the view of overesteeming view. Then overesteeming discipline and austerity basically means that you're thinking about things that are not the cause of liberation as being the cause of liberation. Torturing yourselves by some various penances to absolve yourself of sins, as they do in many Hindu schools. Some Hindu schools and so forth. That's the main one that they're talking about here. That's discipline and austerity. So basically seeing what's not the cause as being the cause of liberation. So those are the 5 different types of views. So now, let's see, we've been going about an hour and I'm wondering, should I do this next topic? Classifying as 98. Classifying the kernels. We'll go through a little bit more today. This will give us a chance for actually finishing the text. So Classifying the kernels as 98. This has two topics, the actual and the additional point. We'll go through the actual today. The additional point we'll leave for tomorrow. It'll give us a good way to go over the 98, because when you start talking about, people talk about the Abhidharma as you have to count. You have to know how to, if you can count well, if you can do arithmetic, then you're good at Abhidharma, is sometimes what people say. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case, but it does help to be able to do some arithmetic. So the actual has 3 points: explaining the 36 included in the level of desire, and explaining the 62 included in the levels of the higher realms, and the summary. Okay. So explaining the 36 included in the level of desire has 2 points. So this is 2 points, is the 32 discarded by seeing, as well as the 4 that are discarded by meditation. If you look at the book on page 392, it's a little bit clearer than on the small amount of screen that I'm sharing right now. So you've got, basically, we're dividing them into 2 main parts: those that are discarded when you see the nature of the 4 noble truths on the path of seeing, and those that are discarded on the path of meditation. So you've got that's what we're just dividing it by. Discards of seeing means those that are discarded when you see the nature of the 4 noble truths. Discards of meditation are those that you need to work a little bit harder to discard, and they take more time of meditation on the path of meditation. So explaining the 32 discarded by seeing, they're 10 and 7, 7 and 8, excluding 3 or else 2 views. When suffering and so forth of desire is seen, they are discarded in order. Okay. This is one of those verses that when you read it, the first time you read it, it's just like, what is he saying? When you know it, when you have learned it, it's actually a really great little summary. 10 and 7, 7 and 8, accepting 3 or else 2. Yeah, that makes sense after you've learned it. So what is he saying? So the Sutra of Abhidharma explains the kernels as 98. So this sutra says there are 98 kernels. Well, what are the 98? They're just the discards of seeing and meditation in all 3 realms. So you've got the discards of seeing and meditation I just explained. Then you've got the 3 realms of desire, form, and formless. So among them, to talk about the first, you've got the discards of seeing in the realm of desire. So that's what we're talking about here. Now, when you have discards of seeing, the way you see on the path of seeing is that first you see the truth of suffering, then you see the truth of origin, and then you see the truth of cessation, then you see the truth of path. And each time that you see a truth, you discard different discards, right? So when you see the truth of suffering in desire, then you discard a certain number of kernels. Then you see the truth of origin and desire. Well, okay, not quite. This is not quite the sequence, but basically, then when you see the truth of origin and desire, you discard a certain number of others. And then when you see the truth of cessation and desire, there are some other ones that you discard. And then when you discard the truth of the path, the discards of the truth, when you see the truth of the path, then you discard more in desire. And it's the same in the form and formless realms. So there are these different afflictions in each of the different realms that are discarded in these 4 stages of the path of seeing. So we can basically, we then classify the discards as, well, when are they discarded? So those that are discarded by seeing the truth of seeing are what we say. Of the previously explained 10, that would be the 5 non-views and the 5 views, there are 10 of suffering. There are all 10 of suffering. So what this is saying in shorthand is that when you see the truth of suffering, you are discarding all 10. So that would be your desire, anger, pride, ignorance, doubt, the 5 non-views, as well as the personality extreme, wrong views, overesteeming view, and overesteeming discipline and austerity. So you've got those 10, all 10 of them when you see desire. Then there are 7 when you see origin, 7 when you see cessation, and 8 of path. So there are fewer when you see origin, cessation, and path. So for origin and cessation, as it says here in the text, there are these 10, excluding the 3 views of personality extreme and overesteeming discipline and austerity, or else for the path, there are the first 2 personality extreme views, because a discard must mistakenly engage the truths either directly or indirectly, and those views do not engage those truths, is what it says. Then lastly, it says they're discarded in order. When the nature of the truths of suffering and so forth, origin, cessation, and path of desire is seen, they're discarded in order. So now, this is not necessarily the easiest bit to get right away. So we will use our modern educational methods. And here, what do we have? Okay, so classifying the kernels as 98, the 36 in the desire realm and the 62 in the higher realms. So what do we have here? We have, okay, we've got all these different discards, right? So on the left, you see we've got desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt, the 5 non-views, and then we've got personality, extreme, wrong view, and overesteeming discipline. So with the 5 non-views, when you're looking at, when you first get to the path of seeing and you see the truth of suffering in desire, you discard 5, the 5 non-views, right? Desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and doubt. Because there's desire that focuses on the truth of suffering. What is that truth of suffering? The truth of suffering is not, I should make this clear, the truth of suffering does not mean some abstract truth of suffering. The truth of suffering means that those things that by their nature are the results, the afflictions and karma, the suffering that it results. That would mean like your body, anything that's like the experience of birth, that is what we mean. And birth and so forth, your body, physical things generally are the truth of suffering. So when you have desire that is attachment for food, right? Or a desire that is attachment to your body, or anger or pride that's attached to things that are included in the truth of suffering, those 5 are discarded when you see the truth of suffering. At the same time, you also discard doubt, or discard the views. And for all 5 of the views are discarded. The personality view is what? It's seeing me and mine. An extreme view is saying that either it's permanent, eternalist or nihilist view. A wrong view is denying, overesteeming the view, and overesteeming discipline. So when you see the truth of the path and you realize that everything is, that all composite phenomena, that everything is impermanent, suffering, selfless, and empty, then at that point you eliminate all you see that everything is selfless. There's no way there can be personality view. You see that it's impermanent. There's no way you can have the wrong view, and so forth. So in this way, all 5 views. That's when you see the truth of suffering. Now you can also have discards of looking at that focus on the truth of the origin. So what is the truth of the origin? Well, it is your karma and afflictions. Excuse me. So when you can be looking at karma and afflictions, at your actions and your afflictions, and you can be attached to them, you can get angry at them, you can be pride and anger. So you've got all 5 of those for the truth of origin. So those are looking directly at those, they directly engage those phenomena. Now, when you get to the truth of the origin, in the views, you don't have personality view. You don't have extreme view. You don't have personality view because in the first, when you saw the truth of suffering, you already realized that there's no self. So how can you therefore have personality view in any of the later views? You can't. That's the great exposition tradition. And then there's the extreme view. The extreme view is saying that saying the permanent or ceasing. Well, you've already seen the nature of impermanence. So there's no way you can have extreme view with the truth regarding the truth of origin, according to the great exposition. And wrong view, though, you can have wrong view about your afflictions and karma, right? You can misunderstand them and think that you can certainly overesteem them, which is overesteeming view. You wouldn't have overesteeming discipline and austerity, because when you're talking about overesteeming discipline and austerity, that's not looking at the truth of the origin. It looks at the truth of suffering. It looks at the truth of path, but it doesn't look at origin. So in this way, we're missing the three views. So this is accepting three or else two views. This is the accepting three. Then we have the truth of cessation. And the truth of cessation is also, again, you've got the five different, the five non-views. And you also have the same two views, right? So we've got those seven. Now, when we get to the path, it's a little bit different. You can have the five non-views, but you can also have three of the views. Now, as I explained before, you don't have personality view according to the Great Exposition School. And the reason why you don't have the personality view is because you have already seen that everything is selfless and empty. So you wouldn't see anything as being me or mine. And you see that everything is impermanent and so forth, and therefore you don't have extreme view. But you can have wrong view about it. You can overesteem view, and you can have overesteeming discipline. So those are the views. And so if we look at this, this gives us the 10 and 7, 7 and 8. So in this way, when you know the meaning, this is the great thing about these root texts. When you read them, oops, I think I just went a little bit further than I wanted to do. When you read them on their own, they like make no sense. But when you know what they're talking about, they're like really good synopses or reminders of what we're saying. So those are the views. So that is the discards of seeing. Now, if we continue with the text, let me go back and get the other screen. The other type of discard we have is the discards of meditation. Four are discards of meditation. The four that cannot be discarded by seeing the truth, that is desire, pride, anger, pride, and ignorance, are discards of meditation because they're discarded by meditating on the path. So what this means is that when you discard, when you go through, there is desire and anger and pride and ignorance that is discarded by seeing the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin, and so forth. But that doesn't get rid of all of your desire and attachment. There are kind of two levels of it. You can think of it as being the grosser levels are eliminated by the path of seeing, and the more subtle levels are eliminated by the path of meditation. One analogy that's frequently given is it's like when you have a really filthy cloth. It's like if you have a white cloth that has been dumped in mud and it's just completely filthy. Well, if you take a hose and you just wash it off, you're going to get a lot of the mud off. That's like removing the discards of seeing. But then if you want to get rid of it so that it's back, so that it's no longer, so that it's a pure white cloth and not even the slightest stain, you have to work hard at it. And that working hard is kind of like the meditation. It takes, stronger and stronger soaps. And at the end, you just have no choice but to use hot water and bleach to get the last stains out. That's like the last of the stages of meditation. So you go through successively stronger and stronger detergents and cleaning things until you get to the end, until everything is clean. So that's the difference between meditation, the discards of meditation, and or one way of thinking about the difference between the discards of seeing and meditation. So the four that are discarded that are not discarded by seeing the truth are discarded by seeing the truth. Desire, anger, pride, and ignorance are discards of meditation because they're discarded by meditating on the path. So in summary, there are 12 views, 4 types of doubt, 5 types of desire, 5 types of anger, 5 types of pride, and 5 types of ignorance, for a total of 36 kernels that function in desire. Well, so let's go back, because this is, again, not so easy. Where did that one go? Excuse me, where is it? Where did my presentation go? Okay, so new share. Okay, here we are. So the 36 kernels in the desire realm. Whoops, I have to go through all of this again. So these are the ones of that we've been through: the 10 of truth, the 7 of origin, the 7 of cessation, the 8 of path, and then we've come to the discards of meditation. So the discards of meditation. Oops. The discards of meditation. You've got, what have you got? You've got desire, anger, pride, ignorance, no doubt. Because once you've seen the nature of the truth, there's no room for any doubt. You don't doubt it. You just haven't got rid of all your anger. And there are none of the views. So you've got 4 discards of meditation. So that means we have the 10 and 7, 7 and 8 plus 4 discards of meditation. So that gives us 10 plus 7 plus 7 plus 8 is what? 32, isn't it? And then 4 makes a total of 36 kernels that function in desire. So if we talk about 12 views, if you take the personality view, you've got 1 type of personality, 1 type of extreme, 5 of wrong, 5 of overesteeming view, and then 2 of discipline, and that and total will make, what do we say, 12 types of view. Yeah. You've got 4 of the wrong view and overesteeming view, so not 12. You've got 4 of those. That's a total of 12 views. And then you have 4 types of doubt. That's the doubt that refers to that engages each of the four truths mistakenly. 5 types of desire. The desire that is discarded by seeing truth, origin, cessation, and path. That's 4 plus meditation. And it's similar with anger and pride and ignorance. So that's the 36 in the desire realm. So that makes the 36. So that's a total of 36 kernels, right? Is that clear? I think that's pretty clear. Let's just go through it one more time. When you get to the truth of when you get to the path of seeing, what you see first is the truth of path and desire. And at that time, you discard the 5 non-views and the 5 views, all 10. When then you next see for the truth for the desire, you next see the truth of the origin, and you discard the 5 non-views. They're still all there. There are all 5 of those, but only 2 of the views, only wrong view and oversteeming view. That's 7, because the other views do not either have already been discarded or they do not engage the truth of origin. Oh, excuse me. What did I do? I just hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. This makes the I'll exit the screen sharing for a moment. I'll just do this by the difficulties of technology. When you accidentally hit the wrong button, then everything goes away. So you've got the 7 of desire. Actually, it's probably easier for you if I just do this again. Let me see what I can do. That's the wrong slide. This is the slide we want. Okay. And so as it's filling in all the things, and this is, I think I was probably trying to be too slick doing all of this. So you've got these 10, 10, 7, and 8, and you've got the discards of meditation, right? So we went through truth and origin, cessation, you have the 5 non-views plus 2 of the views. And then in path, we had the 5 non-views, and we have 3 of the views. So if you look at overesteeming, discipline, and austerity, I kind of shortened the term there, you've got that it engages both the truth of suffering and the truth of the path. So it's looking at the truth of the path. It's seeing it incorrectly. And it's actually a doubly mistaken. It's kind of seeing the path incorrectly and engaging that incorrectly. So it's what we call a mistaken engagement of a mistaken engagement. And that's a term that comes up later, but that's a more important term in the teachings on Prajnaparamita. So those are the discards of the desire realm. So when we okay, pause the share. Let me get out of this. So here, So here, let's move on. So now we've got that. That's been kind of clear. So now we need to talk about the next bit. And the next bit is the discards of the form and the formless realms, the two upper realms. And so I will go through that next. So the text reads, explaining the 62 included in the levels of the higher realms. So we'll go through the text first, and then we'll look at a graph or a table. Excluding anger, these same are in form. The formless is like that. So, except for anger, because there's no anger in the higher realms, they're in the form realm. And the formless realm is like that, like the form realm. So in the commentary it reads, in the higher realms, when one's being is moistened by tranquility, the body's support is clear, and the basis for anger's development, the feeling of suffering or pain, is absent. So these are the reasons why you don't have anger. First of all, you're in tranquility or shamatha meditation. Because basically the two upper realms are just really strong shamatha meditation. So once you have that strong shamatha meditation, then you don't get anger. Your body support is clear. It is more subtle. It's not the same. It's not this coarse material form like we have in the desire realm. And if you're going to get angry, you have to be displeased about something. And something has to cause you pain or suffering. If you're not displeased, you're not going to get angry about anything. So therefore, you don't have any anger in the upper two realms. Therefore, excluding anger, these same 31 kernels function in the form realm. So you've got the 36 in the desire realm minus the 5 types of anger. That gives you 31. And the formless is like that third realm, that form realm with 31 kernels. Thus, for the higher realms, one should recite the verses thus. They're 9 and 6 and 6 and 7, excluding anger, 3 to views. When suffering and so forth of form is seen, they are discarded in order. 3 are discards of meditation. So this is Wangchuk Dorje sort of reworking the verse to make it fit for the truth of for the two higher realms. So now, let's go and take a look at this in a chart. I'm not going to make charts for you every day, I have to say. It's probably not necessary every day. But today, it kind of is. Okay. Here we are. Here's our lovely chart. The discard, so in the 31 kernels in the form realm, the difference it goes like this. What have we got? We've got basically, it's similar to the desire realm. But the difference is here, anger. There's no anger. So instead of being 10 and 7, 7 and 8, it's now 9 and 6 and 6 and 7. Right? And instead of being 4 discards of meditation, instead of being 4 are discards of meditation, you've got 3 are discards of meditation. So that's the form realm. Right? So it's basically the same as the desire realm minus anger. So that instead of being 36, you take away the 5 types of anger, you have 31. And then we move on and we get to the 31 kernels in the formless realm. And these are exactly the same as in the form realm. Well, they're not exactly the same. They're the same categories. The difference in that they're, instead of focusing on the form realm, they focus on the things in the formless realm. That's a difference. But other than that, they are the same. So in this way, we had 36 kernels of desire, 31 in form, and 31 in formless, which gives you 98 kernels, right? So that is the great exposition tradition. There are 98 different types of kernels. So here, let's exit this for a moment. We'll go back to the other one. So thus they're proposed as 98. So thus by classifying the 6 kernels in terms of aspect, class, and realm, the kernels are proposed as 98 by the masters of the Abhidharma. So I think, of course, we've got another paragraph right here. I'll go through this one other paragraph. We'll revisit this tomorrow. You might be thinking, oh no, is this going to be the way it is for the entire 7 or 8 weeks of this Abhidharma course? This is the day when we get the biggest numbers of counting. This is the highest, the most arithmetic you have to do. So if you're a math challenged or arithmetic challenged, don't worry. It's not going to be quite as intense over the next, in the other classes. At any rate, here it says, in the Compendium of Ascertainment, so this is a text by a Sangha, what is it? Nirnaya Samuchaya, the Nambatema Wavala Dupa in Tibetan. The view of overesteeming discipline and austerity is said to mistakenly engage all 4 truths, so there are 94 discards of seeing. In other words, they're saying that the overesteeming discipline and austerity, which is only said to engage the truths of suffering and path in the Great Exposition, actually they say that it engages all 4 of the truths. The discards of meditation are explained similarly to this explanation, they say. So that would be 4 of those. So that would be essentially just adding, what is it, adding two more or something like that. At any rate, just a couple more. It's not so different. In the Compendium of Abhidharma, the Compendium of Ascertainments is one text by Asanga, and then there's another one called the Compendium of Abhidharma, which presents the Abhidharma of the Mahayana tradition. So all 5 views are explained to explain all mistakenly engage all 4 truths. There are 112 discards of seeing. And the views of personality and holding extremes are also have instinctive types that are discards of meditation. So in other words, what they're saying with the view of personality and view of holding extremes, they're saying that there are 2 types. There is the instinctive type, which you just naturally have, which all sentient beings naturally have. This is just this kind of sense of there being a me. And we instinctively have an idea that this me is permanent. So that's kind of an instinctive idea. And then there also is kind of a learned, or we could say technically an imaginary idea, which would be the view that you'd be taught if you were taught that you have an Atman or soul that truly exists and that then is permanent and eternal. That would be a view that is taught, and so that's an imaginary view. So they say that there are these 2 different types of view that are also meditation discards. The other 3 types of view, the wrong views, the oversteaming the view and oversteaming the discipline and austerity, are completely eliminated at the path of seeing. So they say that their views of personality and holding extremes also have extinctive and types that are discards of meditation, for a total of 16 discards of meditation. So Zhangti explains that the former is the tradition of the Sutra school and the latter the mind-only school. And the great Chim says that both are the mind-only tradition, but the first is in terms of the actually exclusive aspects and the latter in terms of mere exclusion. 2 sentences are giving positions of Tibetan masters. So Zhangti is a great early master of the Tibetan Abhidharma tradition. I don't know too much about him other than his name and that he wrote a treatise that was highly regarded at the time in probably the 11th or 12th century. And he says the former is a tradition of the Sutra school and the latter is the mind-only school. But Mikya Dorje and also Khenchen Trangpa Rinpoche in his shorter commentary on the Abhidharma that is basically an extract from the Mikya Dorje commentary, say that there's actually no basis for saying this. Drangti says this, but he gives no evidence, he gives no proof. So they don't. So Mikya Dorje and by extension Trangpa Rinpoche don't have much room for that view. And the Great Chim says that both are the mind-only tradition. If you look at the translation of the Chim Abhidharma called The Ornament of Abhidharma, it's definitely worth looking at, translated by Ian Coughlin. In that, it's actually the Chim that is being referred to here is not that same Chim, because in that text it says essentially the same thing as it says here, and doesn't give any more explanation than is given here. So again, it's a question. It's just a point that is brought up here in the commentary. So That is that. And I'll just kind of briefly show you charts of those two traditions. Next one down. So this is the, according to the Compendium of Ascertainments. Oh, excuse me, I've got one check mark that ended up red. At any rate, so basically it's saying that it's basically just, the only difference is the final row of view. Otherwise, it is more or less the same. You're adding 6 different views of oversteaming discipline. So that's the Compendium of Ascertainments, pretty similar to what we saw before. And then there's the Compendium of Abhidharma, where basically you've got all 10 for each of the 4 discards of seeing. And then you have the 2 views also for the discards of meditation. So that gives you an additional number of discards. So that's the kind of extensive, excuse me, the extensive classification into 98, or if you want to go into 136 or whatever. Now, actually, all of these can be classified further to be 300 and some odd, 200, 300, 400. Essentially, you can classify them as many as you want, but this is the basic one that we need to know. And the reason why we need to know this is we need to understand what are we discarding at which point on the path, okay? So that's the 98 kernels. So what we will do is we will go over these again just briefly tomorrow, because I know this is something that takes a while to do that, and then we'll go on with the text for the rest of this. So continue with the text from the of Wancho Torje's text. So that is enough for this morning. In future sessions, we will figure out a way to have question and answer. When we're doing it, for the people who are participating in the Zoom session, question and answer is actually quite easy. For people who are watching over YouTube, which are people who are at in a time zone where it's inconvenient or you have to work or something like that, then we need to think of a method for getting questions from you as well, because you also have questions. So we will do that starting tomorrow or the next day. So now let us please dedicate the virtue of speaking, of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space. Hang on. Somehow this is getting more complicated than I thought, the screen sharing. Okay. Osanam de tam je sepani tobne nye beranam pamchete Kegana chibalong chubai Sibe tolero kunyuro shon. So thank you very much.